Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Michael from the Honest Youth Pastor YouTube channel, and what you're about to listen to or watch is a short section of a much longer podcast that me and my friend Rob did for the Babbling Pastor podcast. If you're interested in the whole thing before it comes out to everybody else, you can support us over on Patreon and get it there. If not, what you're about to watch is the second session where we talk about how to surround yourself with people that are helpful and can give you great feedback when criticism does come and give you really helpful criticism. If you missed the first episode, that will be below in the description. You can link to that, and if the third installment is available, that will be linked down below as well. Hopefully you find this helpful.
Yeah, it's I think that's a really important thing, when the scripture tells us that we're supposed to be quick to listen and slow to speak, right? And as a pastor, that's one of the ways that applies, is when it comes to if when it comes to people who bring something up like that particular scenario. I've seen, I've seen pastors, when criticism is brought to the attention, react badly, and just kind of with a "who do you think you are" kind of mentality, right? And long story short, after in that particular scenario that I'm thinking of, it wasn't long, and that pastor was let go. Because and rightfully so, right? Because that it was actually solid criticism that should have been accepted and thought through and prayed over. And instead it was the whole thing smelled of "who do you think you are" talking to me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so there was kind of a I'm the head guy, and I know what's right, and so it's we have to guard our hearts from that kind of pride, right? Because let's be clear, like a lot of times, I mean, we're spending hours in the Word, coming up with the things that I'm going to talk about and say. And there's not a sermon that goes by that I don't like get off of my notes some. I mean, that, of course, that's part of it. But I've for the most part, I've thought through all of these things. And deeply thought through a lot of these things. And so, um, there could be a tendency or a world in which it might become easy, at least in reflexive reaction, to be like, what, just, what, take a walk, pal, you know. And so I have to, and I think anybody that preaches, or teaches, you have to be ready to receive that, and actually think about it, and ask the Lord too, as well as maybe others. Like, that's a point, right? Like, if someone brings something to your attention and you're not sure about it, like, we have a lot of blind spots because we don't see us as clearly in the mirror as other people do, right? And so it's important for me too, when I hear something like that. Like in a scenario I mentioned before, I didn't need to talk to anyone else because I looked at it and quickly found, oh, duh, idiot, like, and so I need to correct that. But um there's likely going to be a need at points when you receive something like that to go to other people and say, "Hey, man, do you see this in me? This somebody brought this up," and so that I think that's a thing too.
Well, I think that's a good place to interject this, is that we know criticism is going to happen. That's just of course, like, there's no avoiding that. But having those people around you that are going to be able to have honest conversations with you and not just be yes men or women. Like, so one of the things
Yep.
that I think happens sometimes with people is that they will have a team around them. I mean, and here's the thing. I know everybody's scenario is different. So as far as church size, these people may be in your church or outside of your church. At least some of them need to be in your church, but somebody that you can have you can go to that you know is going to be honest with you, that loves you, but is going to be honest with you. And typically that needs to be somebody other than your spouse for sure, because almost all the time they're going to tell you it's fine. They will tell you often when it's terrible, but you need somebody that's very objective, that can just shoot straight with you. And hopefully you're going to be able to have those people obviously within your church. You're probably going to need a couple outside, so they're totally disconnected from the situation, but that you can go to and have those conversations with, that aren't just going to tell you, oh, you're amazing, you're great, you're the best communicator, these people are dumb. Because I think sometimes people separate. There's a pastor, no joke, there's a pastor, I'm going to try to be as vague about this as possible, that was receiving some criticism, and this is quite a few years ago, this is probably a decade or more, that was receiving criticism, and one of the pastors on their staff actually wrote a blog defending this person point by point about all the criticisms that was shown against them. And this wasn't here's how he's not biblically, this isn't, it was just, I really like this guy, he's my best friend, and you guys are taking this wrong. And it was a matter of, first of all, why does that even have to be public? But secondly, your best friend isn't the person that you probably need to go to be like, hey, do you think I'm dumb? Because they're going to see you with rose-colored glasses. And so, long story short, you need to have people around you, I think, that you're going to be able to go to and say, hey, this was a criticism that was lodged. I don't see it. I'm curious, though. Do you? And it's basically like having, if a doctor, having a second opinion from a doctor, right? Somebody tells you this, you go, well, I'm going to go to this doctor and get a second opinion just to verify, just to double check, just to make sure that you're not missing something and that I'm not missing something. And I think that's crucial, to surround yourself with people that are going to be able to be objective and give you honest feedback and not just pat you on the back all the time. Because that, I think, is the scenario that you're talking about. I don't know the specific scenario, but what it sounds like is, previously surrounded by a bunch of yes men or women, never really received a whole lot of real good criticism or took it in and actually thought through it, and just told this person, yes, you're amazing, you're great, keep doing what you're doing. And if you're not surrounded by people that are going to be able to be objective and honest with you, you're going to put yourself in a corner to where you never think you're wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's important too for for us to think about. So you'll find a lot more scriptures in the Word that tell us that tell us how to do criticism, right? And so there's an expectation on the Christian to restore him in a spirit of gentleness, right? Like things like that in the scriptures that kind of that I think sometimes whenever, even if it's a legitimate criticism, it's important that we walk into that. If we're the criticizer, right? If we're the person bringing it up, it's important that we always walk into that with that "such were some of you" attitude, right? With that in the back of our mind, so that we understand, look, I'm not any better. This is something that I see in this person's life, or something that they did that I think needs to be corrected. But if you walk in to that situation with with some kind of pride as a backdrop, it's, first of all, it's gonna show itself. It's gonna be obvious that you think, hey, listen, you're an idiot and I'm better than you, and here's what you need to fix about you, right? So there's still going to be a huge log in that eye, right? Right, when you go about it that way. God is not. There's an expectation among Christians that we should bring those things up, right? Because what is that particular text even says? What? Remove the log from your own eye so that you can see clearly, to help to do that, to remove the splinter out of your brother's eye. So there is an obligation that we have to one another, to do that if there's something going on. but we should do it the right way, right? And a lot of times what we actually see play out is people not doing it the right way, um, and having some pride behind themselves whenever they bring something up. Um, and so that's one thing. Another thing is, I think there are times that uh not times, you always have to consider the source, right, of criticism also.
That was my next thing.
um
Yeah, I wanted to move to. Yeah, keep going.
yeah, so you have to consider the where is this criticism coming from. um so for me, in that scenario that I mentioned, that was an elder, right, in our church, and we don't take that term lightly. Like, if you're an elder, it's on purpose, right? And so these are men that I meet with on a weekly basis, and spend time with, and joke with, and laugh, and do work with, and all of these things. Um, and so when one of those guys brought this up, it was like immediate. Okay, I gotta look at this, right? Um, now, to be fair, I think that no matter who brings something up, you still need to ask that question first. Is this true of me, right? But uh, most of the time, at least in my experience, most of the time, whenever there's been a criticism of some sort that has been handled wrongly, it's from someone who could do that for a living. Right? It's from somebody who like that squeaky wheel gets the grease thing, right? Um, and so it's if you're a person, so if you're a person in your church who um, always has something to offer, let's say it that way, right? Who
I
always
love
has
the terminology. You're offering something.
yeah, yeah, yeah. If you're a person in your church that is like consistently criticizing or giving advice or whatever, I mean, chances are, look, I love you, but chances are ain't nobody listening. I mean, nobody. And in fact, they probably dread it. They probably dread when you walk up to them,
Oh,
even,
here comes
right?
Tim again. Tim, I bet I know what Tim wants to talk about.
And we just had a Tim join our church, so I don't wanna say
Yeah, it's
that,
not
but
not about you, Tim.
yeah,
Nope, not.
it's somebody else, somebody else. I'll say Hank, because we don't have one of those, so Hank. But but it really is um, a true thing, right? If you have someone who never brings anything up, who's like patient, kind, all of those things, and then all of a sudden they come to you and have something to say, um first of all, a person who is like that typically is going to have a demeanor that makes you, that like sets the mood for someone that you loves you and you want to listen. Um, and so even someone coming to you like that is a guard for you against pride, which is helpful, right? Um, but secondly, you're gonna almost reflexively, you're going to pay attention to that, because this is somebody who never does this, right? And so um so you do have to consider the source. If this is someone who is you back and forth, knowingly living in sin, struggling with anger or whatever, right? Then you can you ask the question, and do some a little bit of healthy introspection, right? And search your heart, and those kinds of things, and ask, is this true of me? But then it's a lot easier, maybe I say it this way, it's a lot easier to let some of those things just roll off your shoulder, because it's like, oh well, it's them. Right? So
Yeah. Well, no, and I think that there, I think, is very important. So we've obviously talked about criticism is going to happen, talked about surrounding yourself with people that are going to help you process that or can give you good feedback. And I think the people that I was talking about that process and help you give feedback are those are closer to you, more of an inner circle-esque. And then moving out again to just maybe just random people that are within your congregation giving criticism and feedback as well. And considering that source, I think what you're saying is incredibly important. If it's the person that always is not happy with how the parking situation is going, always not happy about the songs you're singing, always not happy about the setup of the service, if you change one thing, they just lose their mind. Like that person, you're almost expecting, you're like, oh, Hank didn't talk to me this week. Apparently we did everything right. like you're just expecting Hank to be critical of you. Versus, we'll call her. You got any Bettys? You got any Bettys in your church?
Well, we do. Yeah.
Okay. Well, here you go.
Yeah. So
If
Ethel.
If Ethel comes to
There
you
you
and
go.
Ethel's like, Rob, like I've been thinking about this a few weeks, and I just had a question about something you said a couple weeks. Like Ethel didn't even want to come to you. Like she was giving you such a benefit of a doubt, and she just can't get over it. But Ethel's always before not said anything, and you can tell she's really hesitant to even tell you this. You're a lot more likely to take what she says to heart, and I think that again, if anybody, well, first of all, you've probably not even got this far in the podcast if you're a critical person anyway, and you're just always going to your pastor. But to the point that if you're wondering how should I approach it, I think be more like Ethel than Hank in regards to the fact that giving the most benefit of the doubt as possible, I think, in regard to what somebody says and how, if you have a question about maybe something they said in the sermon. The approach, I think, is very important, because in case, for those of you listening or watching, like Rob's already said, if every week you have something critical to say, I can 100% guarantee you the critical thing you said this week, they don't even remember you said it, because they're so used to brushing you off, because that's all you ever bring is negativity.
Yeah.
And it's not super helpful. Sorry.
And that's unfortunate, actually. That's unfortunate, actually, because when you have something legitimate to bring up,
the boy that called wolf,
cried wolf, right? It's a lot less likely to be taken really seriously, and that that really is unfortunate, because everybody has legitimate things to offer, right? One of the things that we're doing, so we don't have children's church anymore. Which is what as we're recording this, I have a Bearded Bible Thinker podcast that's coming out today, and I'm talking a little bit about that, right? Children in our worship service. And so I'm certainly not critical about churches who have children's church. There's nothing wrong with that. But for us, we just where we're at as a church, we don't do that right now. Okay. So, but what that means is now I have children in the service who are learning to sit in the worship time, and while they're singing, that's easy, right? But whenever there's an old guy up there preaching and talking for like 45 minutes, which is kind of normal, whenever that's going on, it's like that's a difficult thing, because even as adults, our attention spans are garbage nowadays, right? So you can imagine the little kid that just gets handed a phone to shut them up all the time, right? Or whatever. So
they don't get that phone now. They're like, what is happening?
Yeah. So, I just this past week, for the first time, I tried to actually, at least for a couple of moments in my sermon, to actually address the children intentionally. And that's something that, like, I want criticism, so I know, like, is there something I could do differently, or how was that? Was it helpful? Like, I actually need feedback for that kind of thing. So that, and I think that that's also a good attitude that we have to have all the time. I don't have that attitude all the time. I don't, but it's something that should always be worked at, right? Like, I mean, when it's good, helpful criticism that's meant to build up, right? That's meant to help legitimately, then I mean, I want that, and I need to want that kind of criticism and help, because it's a serious thing. Especially when we think about preaching, like, it's a serious thing to be in front of people, handling the word of God, telling them what it means, how to apply it. Like, that's a heavy thing. I mean, it should be anyway.
Yeah.
And so if I'm doing something incorrectly or whatever, it's just something that I should long for, that kind of criticism, if it's helpful.
Hey guys, you made it all the way through. Congratulations. Thank you so much. Hopefully you found that helpful. And if you did, do us a favor and click that like button. And if you're not already subscribed, do that so you can, be informed when the third section comes out or when the full podcast is released. And as always, we'll talk to you next time.